I think a lot of people say, well, if there were aliens, why wouldn't they come and land in my front yard? Why wouldn't they come and land on the White House lawn? Why wouldn't they just let us know that they were here? Visualize yourself standing in front of an alien, something that you've never seen before, and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, like, and you're gonna feel this intense fear. And a lot of times, experiencers say that this is why they won't come because they don't want to freak us out. They don't want to kill anybody. I mean, you could literally have a heart attack.
Is there anything more misunderstood in history than magic? Here's what your history classes conveniently skipped. The world was not built by logic and reason alone. It was built by something much more ancient.
The Hidden History of Magic tells the true stories of the astrologer in the White House, the intuitive who sat alongside Gilded Age tycoons, and the black ops government agencies that have used mediums to talk to aliens since the 30s.
These moments often get covered up, sidelined, or buried because they prove something. Magic is not fringe. It's used every day.
Because while we've been trained to trust everything but our own intuition, the people in power never stop consulting the stars. They know something we've been taught to forget. Magic is real, and we have access to it.
I'm Rhiannon Houch.
And I'm Erin Bagwell.
We are psychics, witches, mothers, and storytellers ready to break down history's best-kept secrets.
Welcome to the Hidden History of Magic.
Today on the show, we review one of the most famous alien encounters you've never heard of, with 62 witnesses that all happen to be children.
From the media storm surrounding the event to rocking parents' belief systems, we discuss what happens when we believe the unbelievable. Eleanor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you. Eleanor Turner is the founder of The Big Favorite, your favorite refined basics in 100% Pima cotton, and she is also the founder of Post Normal, a field guide for the poignantly awakened, where she explores UFOs, religion, and mythology, not to prove, but for you to remember. Eleanor, I couldn't be more excited. You are one of my spiritual besties here, and I can't think of a better person to help guide us on our UAP journey because I truly feel like I've learned everything about UFOs from you. And so for you to be here as our expert just feels perfect. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love feeling like people think I'm an expert. I think in this subject matter, the more you learn, the less you feel like an expert.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, the question we like to start off asking our guests is, how did you find UAPs, UFOs? Like, where did the topic first spark with you?
I mean, I've loved this and followed it since I was a kid. You know, I always thought, like, I remember distinctly in my second grade class looking at my initialed pencils. Remember how they used to make you put your initials on everything?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to see mine ET and think, that's funny. Like, you know, and I loved that movie, and I just always knew there was something else out there, that we weren't the only ones here. After many, many years of kind of putting that thought or framework aside, you know, I started revisiting it, starting a meditation practice in 2023. And that's when the floodgates opened and all the new information started coming through. It feels really timely. Feels like a lot of people are experiencing that right now. So that's kind of how it started, though.
A lot shifting in the world. Rhiannon, What's your kind of ideology here?
Well, I'm from New Mexico.
So amazing.
Yeah, so I feel like it's been a part of the zeitgeist for me for a really long time. I used to have to go to Roswell for sports. So we talked a lot about it as children, but I think when people talk about Roswell and the incident or watching it in movies, it's always from like an incredulous place where it's not real. It's silly and goofy and kitschy and fun. But I also have so many cousins who have seen UFOs. My cousins were witness to the Phoenix Lights
Amazing.
in 1997. And, I believe them. I have another cousin who had a UFO like send a beam over her car while she was driving. And so there were so many experiences. I felt so left out. And then I finally had my first sighting, I want to say in 2024. It was very recently, but it was always just something that I believed in, like ghosts, that they are here. People have witnessed it. I believe the people who have witnessed it. And then occasionally I have like tangential experiences with aliens and UFO and just that like feeling of knowing.
That's amazing.
What about you, Erin?
I feel like I've been reflecting a lot, because of this episode. And I think that my heart like wasn't open to them, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that I really believed until quite recently. And as I've become more open and spiritual and stepping into my own gifts, I feel like now I'm ready to like see them and experience them. But I don't think I was ready before.
Yeah, I'll say too that for UFOs, for the most part, until maybe even the pandemic, for me, it was just a science thing too, where it's like, oh, aliens exist and they fly. And then, or, like that's how they get around. Maybe they're in the oceans, but they clearly have a highway that goes over New Mexico and Arizona. That's all I know for sure. But now I'm much more diving into this avenue of like a spiritual experience of aliens. And are aliens not just this like a reptile, not even a reptile, but like something that we would classify as an animal, and something more like an interdimensional, whatever that means, being
Bingo.
too.
Bingo.
So it's interesting that you're coming into this, Erin, already from the spiritual angle, and that's allowing the material thing to come through.
Interesting. I love it. Well, Eleanor, what we do in the show is we're going to set the scene.
The year is 1994. Friends is gracing our airwaves for the first time. Tanya Harding is banned from figure skating for life for taking Nancy Kerrigan out at the knees. And Whitney Houston wins Record of the Year for I Will Always Love You.
I dedicate this song to you.
But in our Discman, we were playing TLC's Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls while rolling our plaid skirts, rocking our Mary Janes, and applying a fresh layer of brown lip liner.
Meanwhile, at the Ariel school in rural Zimbabwe, the kids on the playground are about to experience one of the most talked about alien encounters of our lifetime. Grab your pogs, lace up those docks, and join us for an encounter with the phenomenon that will leave you with more questions than answers. Oh, I am so excited to talk about the Ariel school because it is so rich. I think what can be only described as one of our like most clearly evidential experiences with the phenomenon, but also so many spiritual questions about, how parents trust their kids and the spiritual element of, children maybe being more clairvoyant than adults. So I think there's so much to go into. I guess we should start by saying they were on the school playground. There was about 60 kids, and the teachers were having a meeting. So this was kind of a weird occurrence where it's really only kids that are playing on the playground. There's one adult manning a snack bar, kind of in the corner of the school, but really not participating, when all of a sudden the children start to hear a buzz. And they hear it almost like a swarm of bees. And they can kind of hear it goes away, they hear it again, and then all of a sudden it gets so loud that kids are gravitated towards this area and essentially see a craft and what they describe as aliens. And this story is so fascinating, and we'll get into kind of some of the nuances of that. But before we do, have I missed anything in the story so far? Anybody want to jump in here?
The only thing I'll add is that before this happened, the Zimbabwe area had experienced what sounded like explosions the day before. There were so many towns in the surrounding area from Rua that had heard this, that they were calling the military. And then a lot of people were seeing discs in the sky. And there was also another school, maybe like a few miles away, that had 150 kids on the playground that did see a flying disc. So there were all of these experiences that kind of led up to this culmination of actually seeing beings on this specific playground in Rua.
Yes. And what is interesting about the explosions, too, so people saw these fireballs in the sky. The local radio station was having people call in to make reports. And because of everyone calling into the radio, a local, BBC person heard some stuff, and the local MUFON representative, which I don't remember what it stands for, but there's UFO in the middle.
Mutual UFO Network.
There you go. Yeah. So the woman who was covering Africa, she did a lot of gathering of the reports for the events that led up to this sighting. And so when people were trying to pass it off as like, oh, it was a satellite that was re-entering the atmosphere and it broke up and that's why people saw what they saw, she was like, well, there are daytime reports also on the same day. There are reports all the way in Botswana, like it was covering a large swath of land, and it kind of primed the area for thinking about UFO experiences too in a very interesting way.
So essentially, the kids see maybe one, maybe two, maybe three UFOs, and they describe these beings as wearing almost like black bodysuits. They have pretty big heads. It felt to me almost like an ant head, like that shape, and had big giant eyes that were low near the face, kind of where your cheeks would go. And the children responded energetically with feeling both emotional and kind of wanting, almost feeling like a yearning to go with or being called to the phenomenon. And then also a deep sense of fear and terror and like these big presences. And I would also imagine kids, seeing something like this on the playground without adults. I mean, I would be terrified. I can't imagine, 7, 8, 9-year-olds who are kind of looking around. I mean, one of the girls says she was looking for her brother and sister to make sure they were okay. I mean, the kids had a lot of emotional, energetic reactions. And even the sound of the buzzing triggered something. And there was also some kind of flowing of a flute that I documented,
Ooh.
which was really interesting and felt kind of creepy in a musical way, to hear this flute that kind of enchants you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do know that there were some medicine doctors who did attribute this with one of their sort of fairy deities. So that would sort of correlate, especially because of the like fairies and flutes and music. But I think the physics explanation for that is that these things ride on frequencies, so the buzzing and perhaps the music and the tone is like part of their technology and how they travel.
Brilliant. Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense.
The other thing I'll say too is the intense fear that was felt. It's called ontological shock. I think a lot of people say, well, if there were aliens, why wouldn't they come and land in my front yard? Why wouldn't they come and land on the White House lawn? Why wouldn't they just let us know that they were here? And when you think about that, you have to visualize yourself standing in front of an alien, something that you've never seen before, that, perhaps you automatically relate it to some sort of insect or some sort of demon that's been described in the Bible, and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, and you're gonna feel this intense fear. And a lot of times experiencers say that this is why they won't come, because they don't want to freak us out. They don't want to kill anybody. I mean, you could literally have a heart attack. So it's a very intense experience. I've never witnessed an actual being in my physical presence before, but I can only imagine how difficult that would be for my human brain to process. And I think it's really important that we understand that that is a thing. And it's probably perhaps the reason why they kind of shield themselves from our reality, because we're not totally ready. We haven't dealt with our fear in a way that would make that kind of meeting productive. Like, for example, why are we always taught to fear bugs? I ask myself that all the time now. I'm like, why am I afraid of this spider? Like, it's just a spider. she's just going about her business, trying to live. And so I think it's an important question to kind of unpack, like, what are our fears and how can we maybe respond with more compassion to something that we've never seen before? And that's sort of, I think, the progression of the phenomenon in these times that we're living through now.
I think it's such a good point to bring up ontological shock, Elle, because even as somebody who's spiritual, when you first start hearing spirit whisper to you, it's scary. When you first see a ghost show up in your living room, it's terrifying. And I talk to clients all the time who say, I had this spiritual experience. It must mean something bad is happening. And it's like, no, actually, it's just your body reacting to the veil thinning and your spiritual gifts expanding. And yes, it can feel scary and it can feel overwhelming, but what beauty in it also to kind of explore and get comfortable in that discomfort. And then that's when the real magic happens.
Well, and I think a big part of that is that we've kind of been conditioned to think of seeing something or hearing something as psychosis. And so, even with what's happening with these children is they see something, they're talking about it, and they're kind of shut down, or it's chalked up to mass hysteria or some kind of trick that everyone's playing together. And so it's really easy to go, well, maybe I am making it up. Maybe it is in my head. Maybe it is. I don't know what's real anymore. And that's also terrifying. What's amazing about this incident is because it happened in 1994, we literally have recording of the children talking about it. We have pictures that they drew.
I saw this black figure running in slow motion, and then I didn't want to see it, so I looked away, and I looked again and it wasn't there anymore.
How long did you observe this whole happening?
I think it was about 5.5 minutes when we went down there, because it was actually quite scary.
His eyes, did you look at them?
Yes.
What feeling did that give you when you looked in the eyes?
It made me shake.
It made you shake?
It was a terrifying feeling.
A terrifying feeling. So was there a part of you that wanted to go with him?
Yeah.
That felt like drawn to go with him?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you say what that felt like?
Again, scary and a little excited.
Yeah.
And a little I shouldn't go.
Yeah. And yet, I want to go.
Yeah. Anybody can think that it's not true or that we're making things up, but we know what we've seen and we believe it.
And they've grown up, and we get to hear how they feel about it today as grown-ups, and all of the ways where they're like, I literally can't talk about this. I saw one magazine article where a guy met with the only person who still lives in Zimbabwe still, because everyone else kind of left the country. And she's at a local bar, and everyone's like, they used a fake name, but they're like, there's Sarah, you're going to be talking about ETs again. And she's like, don't listen to them. But she talked about how she, doesn't talk about it ever because then it marks her. One of the things that she said too that was kind of incredible is she said, this stuff can brand you for life. It undermined Mac's credibility, became a huge unending thing for others, and it certainly fucked me up. I mean, try telling people that you live in permanent fear of these things returning one day. Try telling them that you can actually sense when they're back in our atmosphere. Wow. They'll think you're a kook. All this lot do, pointing to the people at the bar. And so it's it's you don't know what reality is. She has this sense. She came back with this sensory connection with them, and no one takes it seriously.
I think we should back up just a hair, because I think one of the interesting things is obviously when the kids have this experience, they run back into the school and the principal has them draw out what they saw. And I think it's, as somebody who has a 7-year-old and who's watched all these kids, to your point, Rhiannon, we have documentation. There's documentaries about it. You can see clips of them online. But as a mother, to see these kids tremble with fear at what they saw and experienced, I mean, there is no way, like Meryl Streep on Earth, like wishes that she could bring about the vulnerability that these kids have when describing this experience. And there's so many nuances in the pictures. And I will say something that people like to discredit is they say, well, some of the pictures are a little different and some of the UAPs have long hair, some of them have short hair. But what we've learned is that the human brain will always have discrepancies, and discrepancies actually mean that it's more likely to be true. Because if the kids all came together and said, they're going to look like this, they're going to do this, then nobody would differ. But, you know, the human brain is fallible. And so it's really interesting that the teachers believe them. You know, the majority of their parents believe them. I mean, they have kids who are coming home scared to go to school. I mean, these are real serious repercussions that this community had to deal with. And then, you know, Rhiannon, to your point, had to grow up and learn how to assimilate or hide. I heard one of the experiencers never told her husband about it. I mean, it's something that really scarred them in a lot of ways.
Well, I think that just speaks to this strong programming that whoever is controlling the narrative around this phenomenon has implanted in the hearts and minds of humans on Earth, right? Like we've grown up thinking this is weird, it's not real, it's fake, it's imaginary. And it's all informed our worldview and our belief systems. And so when somebody comes to you and tells you something fantastical and it already has a stigma attached to it, you're gonna be like, that's not true. And I'll just say, etymologically, the word stigma, that comes from St. Francis of Assisi, who had the stigmata of Christ, right? Well, when you really look and study his journals, because they have his journals, it looks like radiation, or it sounds like radiation burns. And when you kind of think about that experience, he sees a light or a torch in the sky and he gets close to it and perhaps it burns him a little, maybe accidentally. It all kind of ties into the UFO phenomenon. So it's like, oh, stigmata, like
chills. What's interesting about this sighting too is, okay, so we know that lots of people saw things, but the day before this happened, 2 days before this happened, they tried to land at another school, but there was no interaction. What makes this really interesting and unique is that they interacted with the beings.
Yes.
And what's incredible about the two children who specifically, multiple people saw the beings, and they even reported how they moved at a funny speed, that they almost looked like,
I thought that was so interesting too.
Yeah. Well,
which kind of points to the time thing, like how maybe they're not in our physical reality, maybe they're moving through time and space.
Yeah, which is fascinating because, they said it looked like they were moving slow motion. They looked like ants. They were scurrying, which is really interesting. And then there were two girls who locked eyes with the beings. And once they locked eyes, the world disappeared around them and they were in a trance where the beings were communicating telepathically to them.
Yes. And that's interesting because as we know now, and I'll not to like take it too much on a tangent at this point, but like, as we know now, the phenomenon is highly telepathic. And so many experiencers experience this. They like, the lips aren't moving, but I'm hearing things in my head. And the messages that come through are pretty consistent. And the feedback that you get after some time, especially with the adults who go through this and they have time to integrate the experience, the feeling or the sentiment is overwhelmingly positive, which I think is really important to say, especially because these children were, they were terrified in the moment. But the messages they got were pretty incredible. And to hear some of the videotape testimony, especially of the one young woman who talks about becoming over technologied, she's like, and in reflection of that testimony as an adult, she says, I didn't even know that word when I was a kid. Like, so the beings actually imparted to them, they said, look, you really need to be careful. You're not going down a good way. You need to be better stewards of the planet. You need to be better stewards of the environment and of animals. You need to respect the planet. Otherwise, it's not going to end well for you. And they did show them some images of what it would look like if they did. And so they came away with this overwhelming message of, okay, we really have to protect the planet. We really need to do better. But as a child, trying to tell adults that, I mean, they just, I honestly, I think the adults failed them in this moment.
I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't help but feel so heartbroken over the children's testimonies and having to kind of again and again prove and share and be vulnerable, and kind of the psychological manipulation of the parents to kind of shut them out. I mean, so many of them buried it.
Yes.
Because they were told it wasn't allowed to talk about, it was inappropriate. And I should also mention that a lot of these kids who went to this school were white kids of missionaries. And so their parents didn't also have the religious beliefs and understanding to hold something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Another minefield.
Well, and to mention, Dr. John Mack, who's a very, very famous researcher in this area, he was a Harvard professor at the time. And so, he's credentialed, he's respected. He came to investigate and found evidence of, like something really happened. And he was crucified at Harvard. They brought together a commission to investigate him. They essentially just kind of destroyed his credibility, his career prospects. And eventually he died under mysterious circumstances. He was apparently hit by a car in London, and it was sort of like this weird, the timing of it was very weird. So there is a very active cover-up happening. And I think what happens is like, one person kind of sets the agenda to cover things up. And then because you can play to people's theologies or like ontological worldviews, you can get people into the witch hunt and holding the pitchforks.
Between 2022 and 2026, roughly a dozen U.S.-based scientists, engineers, and researchers, many connected to nuclear, aerospace, or defense-related work, have either died under unusual circumstances or gone missing. These individuals were affiliated with institutions like NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Los Alamos National Laboratory, shout out New Mexico, MIT, and various government contractors. Cases include unexplained deaths, apparent accidents, violent incidents, and multiple disappearances where people left behind personal belongings like phones, wallets, or cars.
I think to me, the important thing to remember around this phenomenon and this conversation is like always going back to the way that you feel about it in your body. Like if it's something that doesn't personally resonate with you, like don't worry about it. But like if you are feeling called to it in pursuit of truth and like understanding how that truth feels and resonates in your body, to me, that is my ultimate North Star, is like, because there's so much disinformation and there's so much covering up and there's so much nuance in the conversation that I always have to come back to me and how I'm feeling about it.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really obsessed with is this idea of covering up certain conspiracies or certain ideas, right? Where the aliens came and they were like, take care of the planet. Be careful with technology. It wasn't some vicious, hierarchical, you are beneath us, anyone is beneath, you know what I mean? Like there was nothing violent about what they were talking about. It was like a really beautiful warning and one that I agree with. And I think every once in a while stuff like this happens where there's these conspiracies where it's like, oh, the so-and-so is a clone and they're dangerous. And it's like, well, they're just trying to talk about equality and like they to be good in humanity. And I don't know if that's the case, then I'm like team clones, or if they care about the planet, then I'm team alien. I don't know why we're trying so hard to stop them when what they're saying is actually pretty helpful and beautiful.
Well, I think that's a tell too. When you start seeing people reach for character assassination rather than actually going towards the argument, that to
Mm.
me is like the ultimate tell.
Mm.
Like, I don't care, what you have to say about their lifestyle or like who they are as a person, whatever. I want to know like what was their direct experience and then what was the message. And I
Mhm.
think like when you kind of put that filter over it, you'll start to see a big pattern.
Okay, so the aliens came with this message about being better stewards of the planet and not to get too technologied or be careful for letting it get out of control, right? And they gave this message at the Ariel School, right?
Yes.
And Ariel School is named after Archangel Ariel, who is the archangel of nature and earth. Known as
Wow.
the angel of nature and the lioness of God, she protects environment, air, water, and animals.
Oh my
Amazing.
God. I'm
Mm.
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah, I
Yes.
read that actually recently in preparation for this podcast, and I was like, wow, that's amazing.
And it makes me curious if they know that. If they are tapped into our mythology, or sometimes people think about angels. Well, I mean, we're all channels here. We all have connected with angels and beings of some kind, and it's all telepathic. And so, if you're already communicating telepathically, I wonder if they think that we are aware of what our mythology means as much
Mm.
as they are aware of what our mythology means. If they were like, oh, this would be a good place because they're probably really into the environment.
Well, when you look at it from a time perspective, which they don't exist in time, right? Like they exist outside of it, or at least that's sort of my understanding or where my research has led me to. There's never any mistakes. And with time, we start to realize all of the symbology. Even if we couldn't in 1994, we can now, which is
Mhm.
really interesting too.
Well, I'd love to talk about that because we talked a little bit about John Mack. And the reason that John Mack got involved is because someone from the BBC named Tim Leach was like, I want to cover this story. I need a bunch of sources, but nobody believed him still, right? He has all these kids. He has, traditionally you need 3 sources for something to be credible. Nobody believed him. So he thought if he could rope in John Mack from Harvard, then it would give his study some credibility. He does that. John Mack not only was, somebody who was learning about experiencers, but also knew how to talk to children, which was really important. He psychologically could understand the tells of how children were operating. So we have this situation where these 2 men are like trying to prove credibility. Again, they believe the children. They believe what the stories they're putting out and what they're sharing. And yet we still don't believe. And, fast forward to now, something that I think is new in UAP culture, and Eleanor, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we now have this crop of military experts who are coming to the table and saying, in congressional hearings in the 2000s, I have seen something. Now, previously, before that, you've got your farmer, you've got your kid on a playground, but now we have these military experts. And so something I'm noticing is we are talking about psychics and mediums and telepathics as psionic assets. And we are kind of shifting this conversation from being about the spiritual and about nature to now something more masculine, something more technical.
Yeah, well, this gets into a really, really deep rabbit hole on, the spiritual nature of the phenomenon. I think we can all agree that it's very spiritual. If you go back into the Bible, if you go back into any of the apocryphal texts, if you go back into any of the, esoteric, occult, ascent traditions, you're going to read about experiences like this. And so it's connected. It's definitely connected. There's no question about it. The interesting thing that's happening now is it's definitely like the narrative is being shaped from a defense perspective. Now, zooming out, like when you're really deep in this stuff, you start to realize that people's perspectives of the phenomenon has to do with their own personal beliefs and worldviews. So if I am the Department of War now, I'm going to look at this like it's a threat, and it's going to present itself as a threat. That's the way it works. If I look at it with an open heart and compassion, it's going to show itself with an open heart and with compassion. It's a reflection of you, which is, I mean, kind of speaks to simulation theory a little bit, right? Like the world is a reflection of us. So in that context, the DoD, or the Department of War, is looking at it like a threat. And so it is evading our airplanes. It is violating our airspace over nuclear facilities. It is presenting itself in that way. And they're taking it and they're running with it. And it's my belief that they are twisting this into a religious fundamentalist narrative that the UFO phenomenon is demonic and that it's evil and that we must fight it. And that is in order to push us back into, basically repress us back into religious fundamentalism so that we will not ascend in our consciousness.
Well, and I think when we even look at non-Western relationships with extraterrestrials, beings of any kind, entities, that there has for a very long time been a recorded relationship with beings from the sky. When I think about like the blue beings in the Hindu religion, like we have texts that show us where we have been in contact, and it hasn't been like, oh no, these scary people came from the sky and we had to fight them. It was, they came and they taught us and we lived together in harmony. And so even in Zimbabwe, when this happened, a lot of the indigenous elders were like, yeah, of course they came. We have a lot of holy sites around here and that attracts them, obviously. And then some of the children were also scared because not what they were seeing in front of them. I mean, of course, what they were seeing in front of them, but also because they assumed it was a tokolosh. I'm absolutely pronouncing this wrong, which is a little goblin.
Yeah.
That is a local mythological creature that apparently visits people in their sleep and like paralyzes them. I don't know if this sounds familiar. And like, but also strangles them. So it was like a scary being, but it wasn't outside of the ordinary. But I think a lot of times we think of like Western, white, male, like military, for example, like anything that they write is history. And anything that is a little more indigenous is mythology.
Mythology, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which would serve their narrative in keeping this phenomenon or people pursuing the phenomenon, that would stop it, right? Like I always love to say, especially when speaking about the Bible, history is written by the winners. Okay, so you have to look at it like, if I were a control system and I didn't want you to awaken and I didn't want you to be poking at the edges of reality, how would I get you not to do that? I would tell you it was Satan. I would tell you it was demonic. I would tell you it's Luciferian. I would put all kind of connotation around the word occult. Well, in reality, when you look at all the etymology, I'm kind of obsessed with etymology these days, because when you go back and look at things, you're like, whoa, etymology of Satan is shaitan, which means adversary. So like we know as women who are like, deep studies in occult, which means hidden, it doesn't mean bad or evil, that shadow is very much a part of our human experience. So was the snake in the garden bad? I can't say for sure, but I feel that the snake in the Garden of Eden was the awakener, was the being that helped, Eve ascend. All that said, history is written by the winners. Think about it.
I mean, I can say as someone who's studying the goddess era right now that the reason that we use the snake as our symbol of, evil is because it was the symbol of the goddess.
There you go.
It was the absolute iconography that women used to have and hold, and sometimes, especially in places like Greece and Crete, where they would get bit by small amounts of venom, channel. They were the priestesses of these towns, and so Catholicism saw that old world, old gods, and said, anybody associated with this is associating with evil. Period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Nailed it.
Well, and I would even say unwinding it from religion, because there are plenty of people who don't necessarily see it as evil or demonic, right? But there are, I mean, in a Christo-fascist nation, there are a lot of people who do, and they are really, pumping that narrative. But also the way that they get the secular world on board with this too is just by saying it doesn't exist. Just by saying it's not real, like, no, you're misthinking thing, like literal gaslighting, right? Like, oh, you're seeing it was just a balloon, you're being silly. And so it's we don't even have to make it evil. We could just make it not exist,
right,
for it to be this cover up.
Right. But I also think there is something to, especially what's happening now in Iran. There have been several experiencers. I know we're not talking about Chris Bledsoe today, but he is an experiencer who has had some prophecies about wars in the Middle East and what this is bringing forth, and that, the goddess is reintroducing herself, and this is sort of the last stand of the patriarchy. And, he's sort of known for his ability to invite in orbs, and has shown many people the phenomenon in person, and it's been a really beautiful experience. And I think from a war perspective and from a secular perspective, like, just telling people that, well, the aliens are coming and they're bad, so we need to missile up, guys, and we're going to take them down, take them out, and I think the problem today is that people are so busy, they're so distracted, that they would say, well, it's the military, let's just trust them, everything's fine. And to me, that's just the ultimate mistake. The leaders of this conversation should not be in the military, period, end of story.
Something that you said before, Elle, that I kind of want to circle back on is you talked a couple of times about how people could potentially understand the phenomenon once they become awakened, and how maybe some of the structures in power don't want us to wake up and awaken. Can you describe a little bit more what that means and how our audience at home can start tapping into their gifts?
Yeah. Well, that's why I love the concept of this podcast so much, because I think when you really start to unpack, and there is a lot to unpack here. I mean, clearly I've only mentioned some of the higher level things, but a lot of the lore is that a lot of our technology has come out of the programs, whether that's within the government or whether that's just individuals who claim they were working with ETs to bring forth new technology. And for example, the hand radio, Marconi, an Italian guy, I think he was a cobbler, didn't have any experience with electronics, had no idea, but just had an idea that this was going to work. And everybody said, you're wrong, no way. Well, he did it and it worked. And people asked him, well, how did you figure this out? You have no background in this area. And he said, I'm working with ETs. He claimed that. Einstein talks about, spooky action at a distance. We know that he was attributed a lot of his discoveries to God. The word genius comes from jinn. That's something that's external. It's an energy. It's the ability to tap into something other than yourself. And so, whether we're talking about ETs or we're talking about loved ones who've passed on, or we're talking about, God, whatever that is, the ability to tap into that, I think, is part of this whole thing. It's part of this phenomenon. So when you learn how to meditate, quiet your mind, and you learn how to quiet your thoughts, I think that's the big one, right? People ask me all the time, well, how do you know that it's not coming from you? How do you know that it's coming from out there? And I say, you can feel a marked difference between pushing a thought out and receiving something in. It's that once you tune to that, you can start to differentiate where certain things are coming from. And so my biggest recommendation for people who want to get into this is to just start a meditation practice and set an intention of highest good. That's literally where I started. I said, and I wasn't even looking for the ETs. I was not looking for them. And I said, like, I just want highest good for myself. I want highest good for humanity. And that's when it all just came flooding in.
One of my favorite things, thank you for sharing that, Al. One of my favorite things about like opening yourself up spiritually, starting a meditation practice is there's so many avenues. There's so many roads, you know, so many different like nuances and modalities and ways to play in this. So it's almost like that little spark will kind of light a fire to kind of see where you're supposed to go, what your purpose is. And clearly, you know, this is a topic that is so purposeful for your journey and your mission.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to underscore that because I think that's something that's really important is like, if you feel called to this, then it will happen for you, right? Like if you don't feel called, don't worry about it. Like it's not for everyone. This journey is not for everyone. As mediums, I'm sure you guys would agree with that. On some level, everybody has the ability, but not everybody is really committed or interested. I only say that to say, like, make sure it's authentic to you. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well, and I think going back to this idea of that you'll experience it when you're ready, when you're open to it on even like some level. Some people are forced into this situation, but I think that anyone can have an experience when you're open to it. But it makes me think of this like story or tale I've heard that I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to say it anyway. So it'll be the rumor version of this.
We're starting a lot of rumors on our podcast.
Yeah. I only know how to be a chismosa about history and not a historian about history, but that's okay. The world that we experience is a projection from our brain. Our brain is receiving data and then rendering it, right? And
that's right.
Attention is a big part of that. But we know, I studied cognitive neuroscience in undergrad, and so we know from strokes, we know from different, neurological disorders that our brain can sometimes mess up what that renders as, and then people still have full, rich lives where they don't even know that they're not even seeing half of the world. For example, right? Our brain is amazing, and what we experience is just a projection from our brain. So that being said, they talk about how when the ships first came to the Americas, like Columbus's ships first came to Americas, the people couldn't see them because they had no concept of this big ship. So they didn't even see the ships on the water. They could just see the ripples. And so they knew something was happening, but their brain literally couldn't
process it. Yeah.
Yes. So it just didn't exist. And it was the shaman or the elders of the community that could see the ship because they were more open to things that their brain didn't have the information for. So they could literally see it, but everyone else just saw the ripples. And I think about that a lot with UFOs or UAPs.
Yeah. From a physics perspective, I mean, that's right on because they're starting to understand that the brain is just a quantum processor, like, and it's basically a filter. So it just like filters out your one perspective. And if you don't have a belief that ships are parked out across the shore, you're not going to see it, which is exactly the way that people experience the UFO phenomenon as well. Literally, they'll be like, for example, this has happened to me actually, when I'm like, Charles, come out, there's an orb. And like, this is my husband, by the way. And he'll kind of like fiddle inside and then he'll come out eventually and he'll miss it. And so many people say the same thing, that like they'll have a sighting and they'll have somebody with them who's a total skeptic and they don't see it.
That happened in Lilydale too with the fairies. Remember that family went out? It was like the middle of the night. They were camping. And the dad and the little girl saw it and the mom didn't.
Yep.
I believe
that's my biggest fear.
Is that you won't see it?
That I'll miss it, yeah.
Oh.
You're not going to miss it.
Okay.
Not going to miss it.
I love that we're kind of talking about the openness, because I think, just to bring it back to Ariel School, kids are our closest channels through the veil. I mean, I truly believe that they see and feel and are experiencing the world in a totally different way than we are. And so what a kind of beautiful thing that these kids all saw it. You know, it wasn't something they had to debate or somebody missed, that they all got it. Is there anything else we want to kind of mention? I know we kind of went in so many different directions as far as kind of this cover-up idea. I will just add that I read that when John Mack died in London, 3 other John Macks were hit by cars that same night. And so...
Smells like a cover-up
So
to
pardon
me.
me. Yeah, that seems like that seems very suspicious.
Whoa.
I think it's important to note, too, that this was in 2004, so it was only 10 years after the Ariel School. But also, I mean, part of why John Mack was the person that they called was because he had released his book in 1994 also. And so before this, the sighting happened in September. And so the year leading up to September, he was on Maury and Oprah and talking about this thing. But the thing about Dr. John Mack, too, is that he was a psychiatrist who was treating children, and then they kept reporting the same thing. And so he's one of those people where he wasn't interested in UFOs trying to find evidence to support his belief. He was helping children and was like, no one believes them. Let me just hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
And so he came to believe it the opposite way.
Yeah.
Which
exactly.
which I think makes him a really interesting case. And when Harvard did investigate him, they couldn't fire him for anything. Like, they didn't find anything wrong with his methodology or what he was saying. They just wanted to punish him for going on all these talk shows and saying, I'm with Harvard. And it's like ruining their reputation. So they ruined his first.
Yeah. It's wild. But I think the amazing thing nowadays, right, is that we, you know, for better or for worse, have lost a lot of, I guess our institutions have lost a lot of credibility, at least for me. And that's why I keep saying, like, always find the truth in your body. Like, and that's my wish for, you know, humanity at this point. I just wish that people would slow down, start a meditation practice, and start to really find the practice of truth in the body. Because I think, worry, along with a lot of people, that this phenomenon will be twisted, and it already is being twisted, and that they will start to push us back into the proverbial broom closet. And ladies, I don't know about you, but I'm not going back in there.
No,
I'm not going back in there.
there.
So find the truth. Find the truth in your heart. That's where it is. That's why the Egyptians were so obsessed with the heart, because it's there.
Do you have a favorite protocol or meditation to see UAPs or to call in the orbs?
You know, I don't have a meditation, but my practice, and I've told Erin this before, I wrote something about this on my Patreon. I will go out and I will say, like, you know, I'll just be meditating in the backyard or something, and I'll look up at the sky and I'll say, you know, I don't really need to see anything today. If you want to show me, that's great, but I don't need to see it because I know you're there. And it's that faith component that I'm stunned what I see. And the other day I saw something during the day, which is really odd. I actually have a video of it. I'll send it to you guys. It's so cool. It's like silver, and it's like moving around in this weird way, and then it just sort of drifts off. It's like the strangest thing that, well, that's not true. I've seen some pretty strange things, but it was one of the stranger ones. It was pretty cool because it came during the day.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I will also say, like, if you're near a military installation, be careful, because like, and in especially populated areas too, because you can invite them in and they'll come, and then like we have weapon systems, and our military will go after them. So got to be careful.
A good tip. Before we wrap up here, I want to remind listeners that in our bonus episode, we're going to ask Eleanor to share her experience with the UAP because I want to hear that full story. And we're also going to be answering questions from children that we have gathered. They have the best questions about aliens. And so we're going to do a little bit of channeling and see what comes through to answer their questions. Before we go, Al, can you tell people about your Patreon? Can you tell people about The Big Favorite? How can our audience support you?
Sure. So if you're in need of really good plastic-free basics.
I've got my cotton tee on right now.
She's wearing it. I have an undyed tee under here. We make really beautiful premium cotton basics for your top drawer. So please come find us at thebigfavorite.com. And if you're interested in more of the UAP area, then definitely come subscribe to my Patreon. It's post-normal. And I'm on there with some sort of like long form content maybe once a week, and shorter form I'm gearing up to like 3 or 4 days a week. So come join me there.
I love it. We're so grateful to have you share, and you had also recommended the Ariel School, which is such a fantastic topic. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for being our alien expert.
Thanks for having me.
Want to go deeper with us? Here's a sneak peek of our bonus episode dropping this Friday. Subscribe on Patreon or Apple Podcasts to hear the full conversation.
What do aliens like to eat? Do aliens get married? What do aliens play with when they're up in the sky?
Good morning.
Good morning, aliens. Do you have a dog, aliens? Are you blue or green?
Rhiannon, since you mentioned the being behind you, I can't stop seeing it.
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah.
That's just Rhiannon's energy.
She has a lot of spirit boyfriends these days, to be honest.
Oh man, this is a difficult one. This
Great.
may open up a little bit of something. So decide whatever you want to include.
I was gonna say that. I had a feeling, but is there any more like
how
elaboration?
Yeah, more.
Thank you so much for listening to The Hidden History of Magic. If you like the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. This show is produced by Rhiannon Houch and Erin Bagwell. A very special thanks to our patrons who make this podcast possible.
To join our coven of gorgeous witches, get bonus episodes, attend live events, and learn real magic inspired by each episode, join us on Patreon.
If you would like your own personal reading from Rhiannon or Erin, check out our links in the show notes. Until next time.